Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Where it's 4 minutes after 9 on Tuesday, the 23rd of May, and delighted to welcome to the studios Ed Davey, the leader of the buoyant Lib Dems, who I'm sure is going to take us back to the success they enjoyed in those May elections, and indeed look forward to the upcoming general election. And on that subject, before we go, Barbara, you'll be the first caller, coming to you in just a moment, but give me a minute if you would. News effectively broken, not quite overnight, but through the day yesterday. One of your target seats now, the horizon has changed. Dominic Raab saying that he will be standing down in Esher and Walton. Your reaction to that? What number is that in your target of seats, Sir Ed? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nate. It's lovely to be here. I think he knew he was going to lose. We've been working really well there. I've got a fantastic candidate, Monica Harding. And I think it's not just about him going, to be honest. We found it's people wanting an MP who's going to stand up for them. And someone like Monica, I think, will be a champion for people in Esher and Walton. Who knows whether they're going to take it? Well, we'll be working every day to earn the trust of people in Esher and Walton because they've never had a Liberal Democrat MP before. It's actually the constituency butts mine.
Oh, is it next to Kingston Surbiton, is it?
Right next to.
What's the majority? It's not a huge majority. That
it's under 3,000. Under 3,000. And we found lifelong Conservatives saying they just feel the government's out of touch. And so it's not just about Dominic Raab, it really is about the whole Conservative Party.
So was it more government than Mr Raab, or a bit of both?
It was a bit of both. I'm not going to mess around with you. But I think increasingly, as time's gone on, when we, for example, saw the Liz Truss budget, which so damaged people's savings and pensions and the economy, and then Rishi Sunak, I think initially people were quite impressed by him, but I think they've lost trust in him as well. And so I think we are seeing lifelong Tories who didn't vote for us last time, who say they're going to vote for us next time.
So Esher and Walton within your grasp, you would say now?
Oh, I hope so. But we're going to work for it.
Okay. Let's get those calls through to Barbara is in Havant. Barbara, you're through to Sir Ed Davey. Go ahead, your question. Morning to you, Barbara.
Oh, good morning. In the event of a hung parliament, would you go into coalition with Labour? Would an agreement from Labour to legislate for proportional representation be one of your red lines for entering such a coalition?
Barbara, stay on the line. Let's put those questions to Sir Ed. Sir Ed.
Well, Barbara, good morning, and thank you for your question. I've got to be frank with you, though. When I became leader of the Liberal Democrats, I said my focus was to beat Conservative MPs, one or two SNPs in Scotland, but the vast majority of the seats we can win are against the Conservatives, and to get this awful Conservative government out. That is my focus, and I'm focused entirely on that. You mentioned PR electoral reform. Let me answer that one. It's really important to us. And anyone who's looked at the Liberal Democrats over the life of our party will know that it's always something we think is important. And the reason we think it's important is because we want people's vote to count. So many people's votes are wasted under the current system. That seems unfair. And so to have a better democracy, and let's face it, our politics is not working at the moment. We think electoral reform is really, really important.
Barbara, a quick response to what you heard before I move on.
Yes, well, I appreciate the answer about not thinking about coalitions because wanting to win, obviously that's what any party leader is going to say. I understand that. I'm heartened by the continuing support from the Lib Dems for proportional representation because the current system is not democratic, and I would welcome the introduction of proportional representation. So thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Just to expand on that, would it be a red line if you were to go into negotiations with Sir Keir, something about proportional representation?
Well, I've worked with leaders of the Liberal Democrats over the last 25 plus years, a long time. And one thing I've noted is some of those leaders have focused exactly on that sort of question. They've thought about what happens after the election. And the real problem with that is it means you lose some focus on the job in hand. And I ain't going to do that.
You can't do both?
No, well, listen, I don't want to because I don't want to take voters for granted. I want to make sure, and honestly, that's so important. When I talk to people, I've been going, as you said, the local elections up and down the country. One thing that keeps coming over from voters is they feel the government takes them for granted, and then they feel that politicians take them for granted. And I think if you start sort of talking about all this Westminster bubble stuff, that they think come on, what are you going to do for me? And so I want to talk about Liberal Democrat policies on the NHS, whether it's GPs, whether it's carers and so on. I want to talk about Liberal Democrat policies on sewage. You and I were discussing it just the other day. I want to talk about our policies on the cost of living, which is, I think the big issue is the cost of living. Food prices, energy prices, people really struggling in ways I've never seen before. High rents, mortgage costs going up. That is what's on people's minds.
Lastly, before we go to the next caller, Trevor, I know you want to talk about water. Coming to you in a moment. You mentioned the issue with the health service. What would you do about the junior doctor strike and the other strikes we've seen in the health?
Well, first of all, you've really got to engage with the nurses, the doctors, ambulance workers, whoever they are. And I think the government's been really slow in doing that. I think we've got to fess up to the issue that the cost of living has eroded a lot of people's spending power and their wages. And the thing about the NHS, which is so endemic, is the shortage of staff.
Right.
We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough midwives, and so on. And, in a market, you'll do it as an employer here at LBC and Global.
Yep.
You'll need to know that if you want more people, you may have to actually pay them properly. And so I think the government needs to get around the table and see these negotiations, not just about the negotiations that are just directly in front of them, but see it about the future of the NHS. Because if we don't get more GPs, people will really struggle.
Lastly on this, when Steve Barclay says he's not prepared to negotiate with the junior doctors all the time they have these strike dates in the calendar, do you support that?
No, I don't, because I just think that's sort of macho stuff. I mean, come on, this is about people's health. People are waiting for cancer operations. People are worried about their loved ones. Can we just drop the macho stuff and get around the table?
Trevor's in New Eltham. We mentioned water. Trevor, your question.
Good morning, Sir Ed. Thanks for taking my question. So listeners like me have paid water bills, expect them to be invested. They haven't. They paid out billions to shareholders over decades. That should have been used to fix the problem. 550 million, $500 million, is going out in the coming weeks alone. Fines don't work. Current government has failed to hold them to account for a decade, instead voting to allow sewage dumping. Now, we, the consumer, are expecting to pick up a bill of $10 billion, despite consumers paying $2.3 billion more per year, as suggested by University of Greenwich Research. We need a competent government with teeth. I know your plan is to tax them, but it needs to go much further. For example, would you consider jail time for company execs?
Okay. Well, Trevor, first of all, thank you for your question. The issue around...
It's fair to say the Lib Dems were onto this some time ago. I have to give you and your colleagues credit here. You were sounding the alarm about this to me on this show years ago about the quality of water.
Well, that is kind of you. I mean, we were campaigning, a number of us in our constituencies about it. I've got a river called the Hogs Mill, which is a tributary to the Thames, a very precious chalk stream. Sewage is a massive issue there. But where we realised that it was connecting to people in a way which we, to be honest, we hadn't really recognised. We saw it as a bit of an issue. We didn't realise how the public were so alarmed about it, was during the Chesham and Amersham by-election. I remember in true blue Buckinghamshire, which we won, much to everyone's surprise, including my own. And we were in the River Chess with Sarah Green, who's now the MP. And we were talking about the problem. And the reaction to the public in Chesham and Amersham over us raising the issue was sort of really instructive. Okay. And we said, OK, people are worried about this. They share our concerns big time. And so we did a lot of research and focused on it. And to come back to Trevor, who puts a challenge to me. I mean, Trevor, listen, I'm really clear that the polluter should pay. It's a big principle in life. And I do think there's increasing evidence that a lot of the water companies broke the law. Let me be clear on the distinction. Sometimes they're allowed to dump sewage. I don't think they should be, but they're allowed to dump sewage by getting a permit. Right. So they apply for a permit. We're allowed. So that's legal dumping. Shouldn't be, but it is. But then there's evidence that they've been dumping sewage when they didn't have a permit, and that's breaking the law.
So to Trevor's point, would you support the idea of jail terms?
Well, what I would support is the proper processes with those being investigated, and fines are one thing, but there should be proper sanctions.
But what's the sanction then? Well, come on, that's priced into the business, as I said on Question Time a couple of weeks. They just write the cheques, Sir Ed. Well, they don't feel the pain.
You're 100% right. I think we need to be far tougher with them.
But in what way tougher then?
Well,
Send them to
let me
jail
let me give you a list of things, because it's not just jail or no jail, right? There's lots of things. First of all, that's why Liberal Democrats have come up with a sewage tax. We think they shouldn't be making these huge profits when they're not investing, and so let's tax them. They won't do it. We want a new regulatory body that's going to hold them to account. So much tougher. It's got to be much tougher. It's also supporting the Environment Agency. That's been effectively massively undermined. And if you look at the report, and this is a particularly, people have forgotten about this in the debate, the outgoing chair of the Environment Agency last summer wrote in the introduction to their report that people should potentially go to jail. And that was the chair of the Environment Agency saying if there's a serious instance where a water company is shown to broke the law, ultimately the managers and even the board members could go to jail.
But I can't drag you that far down the line.
Well, no, that's part of the law. That's part of the law already. That's why what the Environment Agency chairperson said. So all I'm saying is we need to get tougher. The government, and I have to bring in politics here, I think the Conservative government has been woeful.
Okay.
Absolutely awful. Liberal Democrats have raised in the House of Commons, just as you were saying earlier, and the Conservatives said, nothing to see here, and they've walked away from it. Conservative MPs have voted against proposals from the Liberal Democrats to get much tougher, to stop the sewage dumping, and they've continued to allow the water companies to do it. And I think that's a disgrace. And that's why I think, judging on the results of the local elections, it will be a big issue at the general election.
OK, let's get through some more calls. Debbie's in Swanley in Kent. Go ahead, Debbie.
Good morning, Sir Ed. I'm a community carer, and with the expansion of the ULEZ, I'm left with two choices. I either get myself...
What you do, because I think carers, whether they're paid carers, helping people in care homes or going into their own homes as domiciliary carers, or whether they're family carers, unpaid carers, we don't value them anywhere near enough in our society. And from the Liberal Democrats, it's one of those issues that if we really want to support the health service and sort that out, we've got to value care more. I feel passionately about this. I'm a carer myself. Been carer most of my life.
I read that very moving interview with you in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago. This speaks to your son, doesn't it?
My son and my mother when I was a kid.
I know your story.
But I just want to something about me. It's about Debbie. Debbie, thank you for what you do and your colleagues. Let me deal with your question on ULEZ.
Ed.
One of the reasons I'm so worried about the way the mayor is going about this is he's not taking account of people like you. And there are small businesses who are going to be hit really badly. We've called the Liberal Democrats for a scrappage scheme that's far more generous and including to people outside London, because the mayor's scheme doesn't help Debbie.
No.
You're not eligible for it.
Or people in your constituency. Do you straddle the border as well?
No, we're all inside, and it's a big issue.
But you've got people just the other side who want to work in the London Borough of Kingston. And they can't.
I have businesses in places like Chessington, for example. A lot of their staff come from Surrey over the board every day, and they're going to be really badly hit. And I just don't think the mayor has got this right. So we've called for the scheme to be delayed, to be stopped, for a completely rethink. We do think air pollution is a big issue. We've always said that, but there's other ways of doing it. I'll tell you the biggest bit of air pollution in my area, I don't know whether it's in Debbie's area in Kent, in that part of Kent, but actually the experts tell me it's from wood burning stoves.
Really?
Right.
Okay.
Not from diesel cars.
Okay.
So I think, let's care about people's health. That's right, air pollution's serious, but let's make sure we get the measures right.
But where does the money come from for a better scrappage scheme that would incorporate Kent, Surrey and other counties?
Well, interestingly, and this is the problem with the mayor, he's not really engaged with the government in the way that he should have done. The government, to be critical of them, haven't. So the government has been giving local authorities around the country, we reckon about £800 million to support their scrappage schemes for similar projects. It's not done that for people outside London. So Liberal Democrats are saying, first of all, the Mayor of London's got to delay this, stop this, complete rethink, but the government's got to come to the piece as well. It says we need to tackle air pollution. Well, what about helping people like Debbie outside London? And then we can have a proper scheme. And the danger is these boundaries, just as Deb is showing, they're not like walls, are they? People cross them every day, frequently. They should do. And we desperately need people like Debbie to do the care work she does.
Talking about London mayors, who's been the better mayor of London, Boris Johnson or Sadiq Khan?
God, dear. Do you know what? This is going to surprise you. If I had to choose between the London mayors we've had, I'm actually going to choose Ken.
in Livingston.
And do you know why? It's because police.
He was the first one, just to remind listeners.
He had more, in my constituency, we had a lot more police officers, community police officers. I didn't agree with Ken on lots of things, let me put that clear. Not his type politician at all on many things. Right. However, on community police, which is a big Liberal Democrat policy, to make sure we've got those officers, those PCOs, those PCs, those sergeants, in our communities, he was quite good.
Okay.
And since Boris Johnson cut them really badly, and Sadiq Khan has not brought them back.
Are you going to have a candidate in next London's mayoral election?
A
good one?
Always.
Any idea who it might be?
I genuinely don't. We are starting our process. We've just got our list candidates, got some fantastic... I mean, Hina Bakari, who's
You've never really made a dent, have you, yet? The Lib Dems, that is.
Well, we didn't do too bad in Simon Hughes. Simon Hughes really had a pretty good result, actually. But let's see. I think people are really critical of the mayor. And they don't like the Conservatives. So I see this time a real opportunity for us. But, I'm not going to get ahead of ourselves. Let's choose a candidate and then they come and talk to you.
We are a national radio station, so we must move on. We're to Cardiff and David. Your questions to Sir Ed. David, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Ed, and good morning, Sir Ed. Sir Ed, could you please tell us what the Liberal Democrats' position is regarding the military equipment and assistance that Britain and her allies have been supplying to Ukraine? And do you think that Ukraine should be a top priority for our government?
Well, thank you, David, for that question. Do you mind me asking, do you have a military background? Are you from the forces?
I'm not actually, but I suppose you could say I do have quite a personal interest in this. I've got a very, very close friend of mine who is Ukrainian, and I did actually visit the country.
Oh, right, okay.
With her last October, and I've seen the devastation that's been caused there.
That's informed your question, I'm sure. So, Ed.
Well, listen, I actually support the government on this, and over the period of over a year now, we've been pressing them to go further.
To go further, what way? Further?
To go further and faster in supporting the Ukrainian army.
Really?
Yeah,
what would you like to see them do?
Well, they've done lots of good things.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to pick a fight with them over something I've basically agreed with them on, but I've always been championing at the bit, pushing them and encouraging them to go further. I mean, if I go back in the day, I remember when Russia invaded or annexed Crimea back in 2014. I was actually in government. I was calling for really tougher sanctions on the Russians. I sounded the alarm at the time. If you go back, I was really worried about what Russia's long-term intentions were doing. And I don't think we stepped up to the plate back then. Putin is a serious threat to our world. And the way he's trying to use energy as a blackmail to us. And, frankly, I was a bit annoyed with our government back then and since, and some other governments across Europe, for not taking that threat seriously enough. We needed to wean ourselves off Russian oil and gas far quicker. And, if we had done...
But you were Energy Secretary at the time.
Yeah, and I put the measures in.
Why didn't you do more?
I did loads. For example, I got Europe to adopt an energy security strategy to try to do that. The problem was they then didn't do it after 2015. And so I really pushed very, very hard on this. And I'll give you one example of something I did, which didn't get the headlines, but I think in retrospect it showed you the right thing to do. There was a company called Letter One, owned by someone who was close to Putin. And they were trying to take over 7% of the oil and gas assets in the North Sea, our oil and gas assets. And I worked really hard to stop that. I used powers never used before to stop it. And I'm really proud that we did. Because imagine if a Russian company was using 7% of our oil and gas. And, so people didn't wake up. I was sounding the alarm. And I'm just really... disappointed we didn't do more. However, to come back to be cross-party, again, to David's question, totally support. If anything, let's do as much as we can. It's our fight.
Okay. Aircraft? Provision of aircraft. Not the pilots, but provision of aircraft?
Yeah, and training and so on. That's exactly where we need to go. And I was really pleased to see President Biden, making that clear and taking now the allies with us, including the UK.
All right, David, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Ben in Harrogate, you're through to Sir Ed. Go ahead, Ben. Morning to you.
Hi, good morning. My question is, given the Lib Dems' success in more traditional areas, will they still campaign on the decriminalisation of drug use so that we can deal with addiction in this country as a medical issue rather than a criminal one?
So, Ed, decriminalisation of cannabis and possibly other drugs.
Well, first of all, Ben, thank you very much. It's good to hear a caller from Harrogate, because it's a seat that we're quite interested in at the next election. We used to hold it. Got a great candidate there, and let's hope we can do a good campaign there. Listen, I think that we need to think about drugs as a medical issue in the way that you.
What do you mean by
Ben.
think about?
Well, if you look at the evidence, a lot of the people who have got a habit, if we're going to stop that and get it out of that, we've got to treat them not just always as criminals, but we've got to treat them as people with a health problem. Because what I'm interested in is policies that work. I'm interested in policies that break the cycle. Because what is so depressing in towns and cities and villages, frankly, across our country, is seeing people's lives shattered.
Indeed.
And it not just shatters the lives of the drug user, but their family, their neighbours, sometimes the whole community. So we have to break that cycle. And so we have to be tough on some people. The thing that I really want to be tough on, and I want to put more police resources into this, is breaking the international gangs. Okay. These are the people who push it, make profit out of it. It is disgusting.
But to Ben's question, decriminalisation or legalisation?
Well, listen, we have had policy on this issue over many, many years, and it comes from an evidence-based approach. And that's what, I mean, I think you
are in favour of decriminalisation?
Well, I think your listeners will want an evidence-based approach based on...
They want an answer, Are you in favour of decriminalisation?
I'm in favour of treating it as a medical issue, and that means you've got to change the way, the law, the policies all around this area.
Right. So you are in favour of decriminalisation?
Well, I'm not going to write our manifesto here in front of you. It was in our last manifesto. We will debate it. But I can absolutely guarantee you, whatever we come out with will be evidence-based, based on what works, and making sure that we break this awful cycle.
But you're not going to answer that now, as to...
Well, it's not.
I understand you want the manifesto, but you're not prepared to say yes or no at this time.
Well, I supported the last manifesto that had it in completely. But the Liberal Democrat leader can have some policies, but ultimately we're a democratic party. I'm very proud of that, actually.
All right. Ben, thank you. John in Wallington. John, you're through to Sir Ed. Go ahead.
Morning, Sir Ed.
Good morning.
What would the Lib Dems do to stop the illegal migrants crossing the channel? And would you cut legal migration, given the sky-high rents people are having to pay and the pressure on infrastructure due to so many people being let into the country, given that the figures are due to be released on Thursday?
Well, John, thank you very much for this question. It's a critical issue. Lots and lots of people raise it. And I think the government's immigration policy has been an absolute disaster. And, people talk about Suella Braverman today about the ministerial code. We could talk about that. But where I think she has failed is over the immigration policy, just as John is talking about.
What needs to be done?
So let me give you a list of things. First of all, we have got to sort out the processing. There's 160,000 people in hotels at your expense, John, and mine, because the Home Office can't process them. And it needs to do that. And if people haven't got a right to be here, they should be deported. If they have, we shouldn't be keeping them for months and months waiting. They should be allowed to contribute to the economy, pay taxes. And that's why Liberal Democrats have said, not only would we want to process those applications far more quickly to get to the decisions, but we'd also give those refugees a right to work. So they're not costing people money. I think this is a common sense thing, and I don't see why the Conservatives aren't doing it.
When it comes, though, to policies such as the small boats, the crossing of small boats, what would you seek to do there? How would you stop those? If you would want to stop them, how would you want to stop those?
Of course we want to stop them. I mean...
How will you do that?
Well, first of all, let's be clear why we need to stop them. This is dangerous. It's dangerous for them. It's not good for our country. So we need to find a way to stop them. What's been really clear is the Conservatives' policies have failed time and time again. There's several things that we would do. Some of which the Conservatives have started doing, but not properly. For example, cooperation with France. I mean, they've really messed that up they're trying to get it better. Let's see if it works. I think we should focus on that. The international criminal gangs are well, because these are criminals behind this. And then I am really clear, we do need safe and legal routes for people who are escaping horrible situations, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in
well, we've got the Ukraine scheme, of course.
We do. And that's an example, exactly. That's an example of a safe and legal route the government did brought in that's worked well, has been much better managed. I mean, I've got criticism of it, I'll be frank with you, but it's much better managed than, for example, the ones for the Afghan people who helped our soldiers.
Okay, last couple of questions. Just before we move on, how big a deal is it to you that Suella Braverman did get a speeding fine and seemed to have sought advice as to whether she could take a one-on-one speed awareness course?
Well, compared to the other sleaze and scandals we've had from the government, it's clearly rather, it may seem minor compared to those. But here's the point, and this is why I think some people, including myself, are worried about it, is it gives the impression that people in power don't act with integrity, and the same rules that apply to you and me, they find different ways by getting advice, for example, having special treatment as is suggested that she wanted. And I don't think that sits well. And there's another reason why I think this isn't just a storm in a teacup, because it goes to the Prime Minister's judgment. I don't think he should have appointed her in the first place. Let's remember she resigned because she broke the ministerial code before over very serious matters to do with confidentiality and secrecy. But he reappointed her. I think that
was under Liz Truss, just to remind the listeners, and then he appointed her when he came in.
And I think that shows he was weak, and it shows that he's got poor judgment. And here, I don't think he's acting very quickly. I mean, if it is a storm in a teacup, why doesn't he just sort it out?
Got any points on your licence?
At the moment, no. I have had them in the past.
Have you done a speed awareness course?
I have done a speed awareness course.
On your own?
No, of course not.
Just coming back to migration before we take the final question, it is thought possible, as I'm sure you're aware, later this week we might be looking at figures nudging or above the 1 million mark. How comfortable would you be with that figure?
Well, no one's going to be comfortable with it. I think we do have to sit back for a second and dissect what's going on here. Clearly, those numbers are going to be inflated by people from Ukraine and from Hong Kong and from Afghanistan. And I think we need to look at those numbers, because I think there actually has been cross-party consensus. I think the British public accept that we were right to take in people from Ukraine and from Hong Kong. You know, we can't complain about Russia's human rights and the way it's invaded Ukraine or China and the way it has hurt people in Hong Kong without then giving some help. So we've got to look at the figures of that, and I'm trying to be as consensual as possible. We've got to assume that. But there is a concern about how the government's been operating parts of the immigration system, particularly work visas. I think it's hopeless, frankly. It's extremely expensive and bureaucratic. What's happening is we don't seem to be getting the people that we need, which they promised. So I think there needs to be a wholesale review, because I think the Conservatives have got the immigration policy badly wrong.
Last question. Mary in Cambridge, you're through to Sir Ed Davey. Mary, go ahead.
Thank you, Ed. I'm asking a question on behalf of 51% of the population. I'm a tactical voter and I would like to support the Lib Dems, but can you answer the question, what is a woman, please?
Well, thank you very much, Mary. I'm glad you're a tactical voter thinking of voting for us, so hope we can get you over the line. Let's see if you like my answer to the question. I mean, the truth is, Mary, the vast majority of people whose biological sex is a woman when they were birth, they feel they're women, so they get the same they feel their gender the same as at birth. But there's a very small number of people who don't feel like that. And the law has recognised them for over 20 years now. So this is not a new issue. I know sometimes it seems, but the law has dealt with this in the right way. The Equality Act is there to, to allow there to be single-sex spaces, so people can have those single-sex spaces according to the law under the Equality Act. And what I want to do is answer your question directly, as I've done, Mary, but also to try and take some of the heat out of the question, because there's a small number of people who actually they have a tough time. They're harassed, discriminated against, real serious mental health problems. And I think we need to manage this and think about it and debate it with a bit more maturity and a bit more compassion.
Well, that's what Sir Keir Starmer once said to me, and he never did answer the question, can a woman have a penis?
Well, I've just answered that question.
They can.
Listen, I've made it really clear that if people, the vast majority of people will have the same gender as their biological sex, but a small number won't.
So a woman can have a penis?
Well, quite clearly.
Quick response, Mary. Has he won your... Is Cambridge a target seat, Sir Ed? Has he won... Has he won...
We're very... Mary, we may not agree on everything, but whether you agree with me on that, I really hope you consider us, because with our policy on the NHS, our policy on the cost of living, our policy on sewage, I think you'll find lots of things that you like.
Women are 51% of the population.
Are you satisfied with his answer? We must move on, Mary. Yes or no?
No.
All right, OK. One here, Darren, please can you find out, is Sir Ed Davey planning to ban wood-burning stoves? This is the conversation we had, of course, about air pollution. I think he may well indeed have one. Are you looking to ban them?
Well, I'm looking to make sure the government's regulations on this are enforced. So the government, under Michael Gove, brought in regulations about wood-burning stoves.
Are they illegal?
No. Some are illegal.
Obviously in some parts of the country, but if I'm living in the sticks...
Two things. First
Cheshire
of all,
and Amersham.
It's not the sticks.
My apologies.
First of all, it's not on all wood-burning stoves. It's the ones that are emitting dangerous things. So if you read the regulations, which I think are pretty sensible, they don't ban all wood-burning stoves, but they ban ones that are not dealing with the air pollution that comes from the fuel. So that's the first thing. And second thing, to take you to your point, it can be in different parts of the country. So if you're in a very rural area with not much population, my understanding, and I'm not an expert, but my understanding is then the different regulations apply.
I hope you'll come and see us again soon. We've had so many calls. Of course, a former leader of the Lib Dems used to come to see me every week. Nick Clegg, Sir Nick, used to come in and see me every week when he was DPM. So I hope you'll come and see us again soon, Sir Ed.
Do you know, once when my first Parliament, I go back a long way because I was elected in '97, I did an LBC programme once a week.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. A little panel with Stephen Pound. Remember Stephen Pound?
Yes, Steve Pound, Ealing. Yeah. Okay, do you still talk with Nick, Sir Nick?
Occasionally.
Yeah, he was always good value. Well, please come and see us again soon.
Thank you very much.
So Ed Davey appearing on LBC. Let's give you the latest news headlines.
Health leaders have urged junior doctors and ministers to return to pay negotiations to avoid further NHS disruption. They've announced another 72-hour walkout from June the 14th in the long-running dispute over pay. There's been rioting in Cardiff after 2 teenage boys died in a road crash. Several cars were set on fire and a number of police officers were injured in the Ely area over